You see the countdown in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now before we go live.
You guys are live.
Hey, everybody. Mike Skelton from the Chamber here. Hope you're doing well. Happy Friday. Thanks so much for tuning in to join us for our first community conversation. We're excited to have with us today Congressman Chris Pappas and Julie Gloucester from New Hampshire SBDC. And our goal today is to talk a little bit about small business resources, the CARES Act, some of the federal support programs that are being implemented, suggested, developed to help us navigate through the COVID-19 epidemic. And we look forward to your questions. So just a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to Congressman Pappas. First, if you have a question during the course of the conversation, you can, there's a ask a question button down the bottom of your screen. You can submit that. You can also talk with others in the chat window. Corinne Breton from the Chamber team will be monitoring that and making sure we stay on top of all the questions you're submitting. And we'll also, this segment will be recorded and posted on the Chamber channels at a later date. So you'll be able to go back and refer to it, and we'll also e-blast it out to members so they're able to take in some of the great information we're going to be sharing. So with that, Congressman Pappas, thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to turn it over to you to give us an overview of what you've been working on, some of your priorities, and thanks again so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's really great to be with you, Mike, and with the Chamber team, as well as all of our local business leaders and nonprofit leaders here in Manchester. Obviously, this is a deeply concerning time for us all. We've seen business as usual totally obliterated across our community, across our state, and across our country. And no one really could have foreseen the dislocation that was going to come about for our economy when the coronavirus first hit the United States. And so the extreme measures that are in place right now for us to stay at home, to isolate ourselves, are obviously crucial for us to be able to beat this virus, which is really the first and foremost thing we have to focus on in order for us to get back to what we all want to do in our businesses and in our communities. We continue to focus on the public health aspect of this, both in terms of ensuring New Hampshire has the resources to meet the needs and the challenges that our healthcare system is facing right now. We've been working with our delegation and with the governor to demand more personal protective equipment, more testing supplies, which is absolutely crucial to make sure not only that we're keeping people safe today, but also that we're going to be in a position to turn things back on in a few weeks. Ultimately, for us to be able to test, to get rapid test results, and to do this sort of isolation and contact tracing that you do when someone is positive for COVID-19 is going to allow us to get back to work and reopen our businesses that have been closed or disrupted through this pandemic. So we will continue to insist on those resources, which are absolutely crucial. Longer term, obviously, Congress has put money behind research, development, and deployment of a vaccine. And while we do anticipate it may be later this year or even next year that comes out, ultimately that's going to be the silver bullet for us, once it's widely distributed, for us to put COVID-19 in the rearview mirror. But until then, there are a lot of public health strategies that are at work right now, and we continue to demand more attention to those things that can allow us to beat this virus and get our economy back up on its feet. We've also been passing some major pieces of legislation, and the last one that we passed contains some significant provisions for our local businesses. So the CARES Act has contained within it the Payroll Protection Program, as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loans that I know so many of our local businesses have been getting familiar with. Obviously, things can't move quickly enough. We're facing a really urgent situation. A lot of our Main Street businesses don't have the cash flow necessary to make it through the next week or the next several weeks, and they need immediate assistance and liquidity. In addition to that, no one really plans for this, for a pandemic, and no one necessarily has the insurance coverage even that would deal with lost revenue and lost sales. So we know that these programs are going to be a lifeline to most of our small businesses, and we'd love to hear your feedback on them. But also, as we look at future pieces of legislation, how we can continue to shape them in a way that will allow them to work and meet the needs of our local businesses is absolutely crucial. The Paycheck Protection Program is something that hadn't been offered before last Friday. So our local lenders had to get familiar with it. SBA and Treasury needed to get out guidance about this program, and our businesses needed to understand what it could do for them. But we will look at additional changes to this. We've gotten some feedback about the 8-week window, the percentage that can go toward payroll and toward rent and other expenses. We hope to be able to change that in a more favorable fashion for local businesses in the next piece of legislation that I think we'll consider within the next week or two in Congress, and hopefully we can get it passed. In addition, the economic injury disaster loans come with a $10,000 upfront grant, essentially. Congress intended that to be dispersed within 3 days, but we all know it's taking a lot longer than that to get the help out there. And so we continue to insist on some speed and efficiency within these programs. And we're looking to give SBA and our local lenders the support they need to get this help out there as quickly as possible. There are lots of other great resources out there in our community too. And I know that our banks, our credit unions have been doing a great job of serving their customers and providing additional flexibility. And we certainly want to encourage that moving forward. So we want to put all the tools necessary on the table for our Main Street businesses, from tax credits to loans and grants. And we want to hear from you about how these things are working, but also what other changes we can make down the road to serve and to meet your needs. So obviously, we want to continue to hear from you all beyond this call. I have Savannah from my office who's on the line as well, and she's dropped into the chat her contact information. So please reach out to us individually if you need any attention or assistance with your inquiries to SBA or anything else you might be experiencing at this point in time. Obviously, this is a new experience for us all. We're all going through this together, and I think there is a way that we can come out of this stronger, but the duration of the hit on our economy is going to be long. We're not going to be able to flip a switch and turn things back on immediately. I think we're going to see, a slow re-entry into economic life and community life. There are going to be some false starts. We're going to potentially see people getting back out there only to have to shelter in place if there's another outbreak in a certain area of this country. So we all have to be mindful of that, and I think all have to be communicating together as best we can. So we thank you all for giving us the opportunity, Mike, to bring you here. And I guess I'll turn it back over to you, and I look forward to your questions and hearing your concerns.
That's great. Thank you, Congressman. I wanted to note, as we kind of dive into the discussion here, that we've posted a link to New Hampshire SBDC COVID-19 resources. The Small Business Development Center has a great webpage of resources and has been assisting a number of businesses with navigating all the different programs and resources that are out there. And Julie, I just want to quickly turn it over to you and introduce you. And if you could share a little bit about what SBDC has been doing and what some of the work that you've been assisting small businesses with. I know I've found in the dozens and hundreds of calls that I and our chamber team have been making, how many businesses are surprised that they qualify for these programs. And many of them have never had to pursue this type of program before. So having a resource like your team and SBA and other resources out there to get out and access them is really important.
Is it okay if I click on this link, or should I not?
Oh, you can click on it. Sure. It'll take people right to, it won't show up on their screens, but
okay.
Yeah, but anyone can go to it and navigate the webpage.
Okay. So my name is Julie Glossner, and I am with the Merrimack Valley region of the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center. And we have a team of 4 business advisors who are working with businesses from Franklin down to Salem and Nashua. And as a statewide organization that gets funding from the SBA and from the New Hampshire Business and Economic Affairs Office, we provide our services at no cost. And we are working with many businesses right now who have been in existence and are having issues with what's going on with the pandemic. And so what we're trying to do is schedule meetings, one-on-one meetings, to go through their specific questions and concerns. We do have email that we will send an email to them, but we find that when we're able to explain to them all the different programs that are out there, because you get a little confused as to which is best for them. We have heard some good news today. I don't know. We've gotten some clients who are getting money. They're starting to get that loan advance or emergency grant money from the EIDL loan, which is great. And some banks are starting to process their first PPP loans here in the state. So that's great news. But there are a lot of other programs that people, if you have an SBA loan already, that you can, you should reach out to your bank. It should happen automatically, but there is going to be a 6-month forgiveness period, or the SBA will cover principal and interest for 6 months on existing loans. And then if you want to apply for an SBA 7A loan or a 504 loan, that they'll cover, if you apply and get accepted before September 27th, that they will cover the 6-month period after that loan starts. So there's many programs, not just the most popular ones people are hearing about is the PPP and the EIDL loan.
Great. Thanks, Julie. That's a really helpful overview, and I think really fits with some of the feedback we've been getting. So I have a couple of questions we can kind of dive into and chat about, but want to remind everyone again that if you have specific questions or feedback, please drop them into the question bar or mention them in chat, and Corinne will make sure that we are able to get to them. On the Paycheck Protection Program, I first wanted to say that, you know, I know our chamber team has been spending a lot of time referring people to this program because of how unique and valuable it potentially can be in navigating this, and lots of businesses may not know that they do qualify for it. Congressman, maybe you could share a little bit about, you know, we've gotten through the initial rollout. I've heard similar feedback that folks who've been able to apply are starting to get the funds. What changes, improvements, enhancements, additional funding are you looking at, are you considering as Congress kind of goes forward and looking at refining and enhancing that program?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I've received the same feedback in my office. You know, over the course of the week, there was really a lot of frustration earlier in the week where folks weren't getting a response, weren't really being able to find out the status of their applications, were having trouble you know, getting it into their lenders, to later this week when we've heard some good news about things moving forward. So, you know, we're urging everyone to try to be a little bit patient. Washington, unfortunately, doesn't move that quickly, but I think they're moving, you know, really as fast as they can to make sure that, you know, they get information out to lenders, and that SBA is trying to move these forward. So, you know, we're continuing to encourage that type of activity. In an additional bill, you know, bill number 4, which I think we will consider in the next couple of weeks, we do need more capacity, especially for the payroll protection program. You know, initially $350 billion was earmarked for these loans. We're talking about an additional $250 billion potentially that will need to be dedicated. We don't want anyone who could take advantage of this you know, really favorable program to be left out. So those folks that are, you know, getting applications in early are at the head of the line and will, you know, get an answer, you know, first. Beyond that, we're concerned about businesses that don't have a pre-existing relationship with a lender or with SBA about their ability to access these resources. You know, these might be businesses that have never been in the situation where they have to ask for help, or, you know, don't really have much debt. So we want to make sure that those businesses can access this as well. Some of the other changes that I think need to be made to this program based on the feedback that I've been hearing, we need to allow more flexibility in terms of how the PPP loans can be used. You know, right now it's up to 75% payroll costs, only 25% can be used on other business costs, and we'd like to see some more flexibility, especially for those businesses that, you know, have high rental rates and lots of overhead. In addition to that, I think it's important that we look at expanding the time horizon of these beyond the 8-week window that was in the CARES Act. We all know it's going to take a lot longer than that for businesses to get back to 100%. And so I think, you know, what's been discussed anyway, among our caucus in the House is a 5 or a 6 month window that would be a lot more appropriate for businesses to scale back up and be able to take advantage of the forgiveness provision in the PPP loan. So those are just some of the things that I think we'll see in the upcoming legislation that will be more favorable to our Main Street businesses. In addition to that, we're also looking at allowing 501c6 organizations like our local chambers, like the Manchester Chamber, to be able to participate in PPP and EIDL. Right now, they're not, but obviously these are great advocacy organizations, economic development organizations that serve our local business community, and I believe they should be able to participate in the program too. So today I'm submitting a letter with 55 bipartisan members of the House calling on our leadership to make that change for local chambers of commerce. I think that could be a good step forward too.
Thank you, Congressman. We appreciate the support. I wanted to also touch on one of the provisions that we're starting to become more aware of that's being discussed at the state level is that in the CARES Act that passed, there was essentially a block grant that went to every state of $1.25 billion that has each state can use to respond to this the situation, and they can use those funds for a variety of different ways. And I think the governor and state leaders are discussing now how best to do that in New Hampshire, because this is kind of an emerging topic that I think we're going to be talking a lot about in the next few weeks. Could you just share, as the CARES Act was coming together, what was the thought process behind that provision and what you would like to see states be able to use that for? Could some of it flow to business support programs to augment or enhance what we're already doing? And generally, what's your hope for how New Hampshire is able to capitalize on those funds?
Well, I think we absolutely wanted to see some flexibility in their funding so that states not only can deal with this catastrophe, can foot the bill for the response efforts that are well underway, but also figure out how we can support the economic needs, which are really diverse across this country. So I believe that no one knows how to spend these dollars more wisely and more appropriately than our governors, our state leaders, and our local leaders. That's why with the $1.25 billion that New Hampshire has received, it does have some pretty wide discretion in terms of how those dollars can be used. You've already seen some good announcements from the state in terms of support for our hospitals and our nonprofits. I'm sure they're going to be considering other requests of how they can help people in this period, while at the same time dealing with the increased expenses, to our state lab and other things that are incurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the next piece of legislation that we're discussing, I think we're hoping that we are able to double down on the support to states and also include communities of less than 500,000 residents. There was, in terms of the direct support in the first CARES Act, it didn't give direct support to communities that were under 500,000 residents. I think if we lowered that threshold, we could allow cities like Manchester to receive additional direct aid that it could put into economic development purposes as well as response purposes. So I think we're going to see some additional money flowing to state and local governments, and we should allow them to have maximum flexibility to be able to meet critical needs and deal with the loss of revenue that they're all experiencing right now. I mean, cities are losing parking revenue. We're seeing a huge disruption to business taxes and our rooms and meals taxes here in New Hampshire. States have to be able to do that, and the federal government ultimately, can deficit spend and is the fiscal backstop.
Yeah. I wanted to also touch on the public health steps that you mentioned that are kind of key to getting past this, and importantly, key to making sure that we don't have a relapse or a spike in the future after we have recovered. And we're all consuming news about this 24/7. And what I hear from the experts is how important it is that we have widespread testing available, and that we also have a national plan on contact tracing, so that in the future we can get ahead of any outbreaks and being able to prevent kind of the community transmission situation that we've been in for some time now. And just want to get your perspective on that, Congressman, of what's being discussed in Congress to ensure that the federal government has the resources and the strategy and the plan in order to do that? I mean, it seems like on the testing side, over the past few weeks, that's been one of the areas that has ramped up considerably and has helped us here in New Hampshire have a better grasp of what our situation looks like. Is that going to continue to accelerate? Do we have the right tools and strategies to be able to get to that place where, there's never a shortage of a test or test resources? Again, I think just recently I heard some concerns around, we actually have the tests, but it's the equipment and PPE we need to administer the test is where we might start falling into a shortage. So just thinking about those public health steps and resources we need to navigate this, what's your perspective on that, and where do you think Congress needs to go to make sure we have those resources?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And that obviously is such an important piece of the puzzle. The coronavirus is so different even than MERS and SARS were because, so many individuals don't even show symptoms. You can, transmit the virus to another individual if you're asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. And so it's been difficult to do the type of isolation containment that, was able to be successfully done with some of these other viruses that we've seen on the global scale in the past, like MERS and SARS. And so that's why coronavirus is trickier. And that's why we do need broad testing. We need to test in terms of, who has the virus today. We also need to test for antibodies to make sure that we understand, who might have been infected during this period, who's safe to go back to work. And we need to do some research into, the antibodies and how that might be able to be used in terms of, scientific research in a vaccine and development of treatments for COVID-19. So those are some of the things that I think are essential pieces. Congress has given quite a bit of money to agencies to ensure that individuals get access to testing, that they get it for free, but there still is a capacity issue in terms of who we're able to test right now. In New Hampshire, we're really only testing the sickest of the sick and our frontline healthcare workers who may have come into contact with someone who is positive for COVID-19. We need something on a much broader and bigger scale than that. We recently received some of these Abbott machines, and you've probably heard something about them, where you can get a test result in 5 minutes. That's fantastic, but FEMA only sent about 15% of the cartridges that the state of New Hampshire requested. So doesn't do us all the good that we would hope, but it's certainly a breakthrough that if we can scale it, is going to support not only the public health efforts, but also our efforts to turn our economy back on. So we absolutely must dedicate full funding to broad community testing, both in terms of positive tests for this virus, but also antibody testing. And in the interim, before we do have a successful vaccine, that's an essential component for our economic and social life to move forward.
Yeah. Kind of along those lines of the public health steps, it seems like, and I think this was mentioned in some of the comments that the governor and state officials mentioned yesterday, that we're certainly not out of the woods yet, but here in New Hampshire, we're seeing some positive trends of flattening of the curve and stabilizing the situation. So now's not the time to slow down or take that for granted, but to keep at it. From your position and perspective, being in Congress, you guys may be called back to DC and to do some work over the next, in a few weeks. And I just, from a process standpoint, I know this came up the last time you guys were acting. Do you feel comfortable that Congress kind of has a plan for you all to be able to work while still putting in place these social distancing practices and so that the government can continue to operate it? I know there was some measures taken. It seemed like you took all the precautions you could, but I think I heard or saw that the Senate might be coming back the third or fourth weekend of this month, and I imagine you guys might be back around that same time. So how are you preparing for that, and do you think Congress would be able to kind of act on some of these issues that you're raising with good public health steps in mind.
Yeah. We're supposed to be back in session on April 20th, and we'll see how that all works. But we're doing all we can right now to connect with constituents here in New Hampshire and to make sure that the next piece of legislation is well informed in terms of what we're seeing on the ground. So we're in constant contact with leadership, with colleagues, with committee chairs, with those who are helping to shape this legislation. So we do that in a relevant way to the people of New Hampshire. So that work absolutely continues, but I think we're going to have to see, just like in any business, modification to the way we make public policy, that we do our work in Washington. Obviously, we have a lot of individuals who are in an age group that's very susceptible to some of the more severe symptoms of COVID-19. We've had several positive test results from either people who work on Capitol Hill or members of the House or Senate. So we have to take the necessary precautions that anyone would. CDC is now recommending that anyone who is out in public who can't keep the 6 feet of social distancing that's required, wear a mask and do it and wear it in an appropriate fashion. And so I think, we saw on the floor of the House this morning where someone opened the session up and, was wearing a mask while presiding over the House. So those are the pictures we're going to continue to see. I think there is some of our business that we can do remotely in terms of committee hearings and committee work. You'll see some of that start to come online. There's been talk about proxy voting for individuals that, either might be in a vulnerable category or might be sick themselves, that they can still vote but not have to be present for the vote. That would take a significant rule change in order for us to do that. So I think just like any organization, company right now, we're figuring out a way that we can continue to go forward with our important business. But obviously, getting the job done is the most important thing. And so even if there is some increased risk, no one's going to stay away or shy away from, having to do the work that's in front of us. That's what ultimately we are sent there to do. And we know that there are a lot of folks depending on us to do it.
Great. Thanks for that. Julie, I want to pose a question to you, and maybe the congressman can chime in afterwards. This was a question that was submitted. There's and I've gotten this sense too from talking to small businesses and members of the business community that obviously the immediate impact was felt by those who were really the tip of the spear of the closure order, the dining, hospitality sector, who really rely on customers coming into their business. They felt the most dramatic impact. I think we're going to see over the next several weeks lots of other small businesses start to feel the impact of this as revenue slows down, as projects get put on hold, and they're going to start feeling the pinch. So while we had a rush of business impacts right out of the gate, we're going to be entering another phase where more and more other types of businesses from other sectors are going to feel the impact and are going to need to explore the resources that are out there to help. If for a small business out there who is just starting to feel the impact of this, what would you recommend being their first step that they should take to go down this road?
So we recommend contacting your local bank to see if they're participating, which many of them are. I believe there's 37 banks here in New Hampshire that are participating in the PPP, or a 7A lender, because there might be some other program, not just PPP, that would work for them. And then definitely applying for the EIDL loan advance, because that's open to any business, so that they can get some relief coming sooner than later. And by applying, they could potentially get up to 10,000. And I do want to make sure that people understand not all businesses will get 10,000. So we're hearing it may depend on the number of employees, but that amount is forgiven. So that's a good step to do. And then start thinking about how you're going to be doing your cash flow and what expenses you can try to reduce at this time period. I know that we're going to start rolling out next week some webinars starting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's going to be on calculating the PPP. You work with your bank, but a lot of times they'll have a spreadsheet that they want you to be able to, in your application, have an idea of what kind of money you're looking for. And I think it's all going to depend too on what happens in DC and Congress, if they can extend that time period, because the current 8 weeks for many people aren't going to be enough.
I think you touched on an answer to another question that for many small businesses, this process of understanding all these programs is a bit overwhelming, and particularly if they haven't had to pursue an SBA loan product in the past or some other loan product, or if they don't have an active commercial lending partnership as part of their normal business activities. So in terms of for those businesses, what advice you would give to businesses that are feeling overwhelmed? It sounds like the webinars that you're offering would be a great place to start, as well as I know your advisors are able to contact and obviously you have a lot more volume than you're normally used to, but talk with them one-on-one on kind of mapping out a process.
Yeah, we have some great news, and Congressman Pappas, thank you to the CARES Act, because they were able to get not only the state extra resources, but the SBDC has extra resources starting yesterday. We have 3 new advisors. 2 were with our organization in the past. So that's helping us with being able to meet the demand in the near future, which is great. We on our website is a comparison chart that talks through the different programs that are out there, or most of them anyway. The American SBDC organization put that together, and it's being updated regularly. So I would highly recommend, if people are a little confused, to look at that, because it does give a good talks about the different programs and give some comparisons to the different ones. I'd also say, if you don't have a banking relationship right now, that there is some banks that are allowing you to apply, create a new bank account with them, especially some of the smaller community banks, and then they'll process the loan with you. We heard that happen last Friday, and person had the money in their account that Monday. So some of the smaller banks sometimes are able to move a little quicker. Mm-hmm. Bank of America has been a great partner, and I've heard Citizens is now coming on board, Primary. There's so many great banking resources here. So make sure to reach out who you're currently banking with, and if you need to, then we have a list of banks that we could recommend to you. Great.
Congressman, I wanted to ask you, this is a little bit of a different question, but it's certainly one important to our young professional members of the Chamber, our Manchester Young Professional Group, about student loan payments and some of the changes that have been introduced as part of the CARES Act and other legislation. Could you touch on, what changes have been made to support those who have student loan payments currently, and are there other changes that are being considered to provide relief on that front? As we know, for many young professionals, their student loan payments might be their second largest expense behind housing. So could you just quickly touch on what has already been done in that space, and do you think there's anything else that is going to be looked at?
It's an area we're actively considering what other options we have in addition to the support that's been given through the CARES Act. But we're encouraging individuals to reach out to our office so we can help them understand, the situation that they face and what programs they might be able to take advantage of. We've been calling on Secretary DeVos and the Department of Education to make sure that there is maximum forgiveness during this period for individuals who have government loans. And I think it's critically important as we look at our young workers, and even workers who aren't so young anymore, who have a mountain of debt that they took on to get a degree, to get into a career that they're passionate about, to be able to make it through this period where they might be not working, they might be on unemployment, and they might have other financial considerations. So we don't want to see anyone adversely impacted by this. We also want to take a look at credit ratings and credit scores to make sure that those folks that do get deferments right now are able to access that, aren't penalized for doing so, and that's something our office is looking into. So we hope that people will reach out to our office if they have individual questions, and that'll help us ask the proper agency what sort of help they can get.
Great. Another PPP question that perhaps Julie, you could chime in on, and Congressman, you can add some thoughts to as well, is if you're a small business that's made an application to PPP, but you haven't heard back from your bank, what should you do? Should you consider applying to multiple banks? I think, as we've already talked about, the lender capacity issue has been kind of the short-term challenge during the first week that we've heard, and more, as you just mentioned, Julie, more banks are coming online and identifying their own process. So if you've kind of reached out or put in an application, but you get a sense that your lending partner is overwhelmed or not moving quickly enough, what would you advise a small business to do? Should they investigate multiple options?
So if you put in another application, a lot of times they'll ask you, and the bank will ask you if you have one in somewhere else. So if they could be patient until Monday, they may find that they're getting some results. But I would say, I was on a call yesterday and they said their SBA has been, normally it's less than like around 50 million that they usually do in a year, and it's over 300 billion right now. So the volume you can see is much higher. And so just being a little bit patient, but if you have multiple applications in, I think that could, be a little, it puts the queue in there for a lot of people, and then it's not going to maybe be as, it's a lot of work for the bankers. I read an article on Monday that some banks were working through the weekend. And so you just want to be mindful. If you feel confident that you're going to use the bank that you've already submitted, I would stay with them. If you think you'd rather switch banks, that's another issue. That's something you could think about, but I would start with and stay with the bank you've already applied if you can.
Great. Yeah, that's good guidance. And I think a lot of small businesses who aren't normally doing this type of activity are in that boat of wondering, who to work with and how to approach that. And as we already have talked about, one of the initial concerns was that 350 billion getting reserved, quickly and taken up. But that's one of the priorities that is being, I think, considered, right now is to add those additional funds. It's, Congressman, it's an additional 250 billion be added to the program. Is that correct?
That's the scale that most of the leaders are talking about in Washington. Both Mitch McConnell as well as Speaker Pelosi have said $250 billion seems appropriate. But I think that's just sort of a next best guess of what's needed for the capacity for PPP. What I will say is that with the economic injury disaster loans, we're hoping SBA gets something up on their site so that you can check the status of your application, as well as when that $10,000 grant might come. That could be something that would be very useful. We're getting lots of calls from folks that are wondering where things stand, and to try to get information to our lending community so that they better know where things stand with SBA will be important. With the EIDL and those $10,000 grants, what we've been hearing is that if you have fewer than 10 employees, you're going to get basically $1,000 per employee as that upfront grant. So if you have 8 employees, the grant will be worth $8,000. And I think there's some consideration being given to, in the next piece of legislation, allowing businesses of any size to access the $10,000 grant. So that potentially could be another change on the horizon.
Great. So we've been going for about 40 minutes, and we have a little bit of time left. If you have any more questions, please act now and throw them into the chat window, and we will get to a few more questions if we can. Congressman, I just wanted to touch base again on kind of what's coming next in helping people kind of really kind of understand the potential process. So the conversation around adding more to the PPP program, which is happening right now, is separate from action on the next stimulus package relief bill that could be considered in a matter of weeks. So those are two separate kind of legislative actions. Is that correct? And if the next package down the road would be much like the CARES Act in the sense that it would touch on small business and support to states and support to healthcare workers and revisiting all those core stakeholders who are impacted by this issue.
Sure. Maybe I misspoke, but the additional support for these programs would be in that next piece of legislation, what is being called the CARES 2.0 Act. And so you're absolutely right. It would have that additional assistance, $250 billion for small businesses. We're hoping there's going to be significant support for our hospitals. We've seen some significant challenges in healthcare right now, especially as routine procedures are being canceled and people aren't going to see their doctors for regular visits. Our healthcare system is starved of cash and is in need of support. We've heard of some challenges, for instance, in the Lakes region with Lakes Region General Hospital, furloughing about 600 workers there. And there's some serious long-term concerns about how viable that facility is and what services that they can offer there. So I think the help for our hospitals and community health centers is critically important. In addition to that, there's a conversation going about additional SNAP benefits for individuals who are food insecure and need to make sure that they can, meet their family's needs. And then the piece about assistance for state and local governments hopefully will be part of this too. There's talk about the Postal Service as well. Just yesterday, the Postmaster General said that the Postal Service will run out of funding this fiscal year. Their revenues are drying up, but they're out there providing a critical service, delivering to our homes every day and our businesses every day, delivering things like life-saving medications and making sure that we get the information we need. And so many of us hope that we can provide some additional support for the Postal Service in this next bill. There's one thing that I did mention about the CARES Act, which I think businesses should know, especially our retailers and restaurants. There were some favorable tax provisions that were part of the CARES Act that deal with qualified investment property. And so this was a change to the 2017 tax law where our retailers and restaurants were left out for accelerated depreciation. So for those businesses in that category, they may be able to go back and file amended returns for past tax years and get a refund for those accelerated depreciation costs.
All right, we have a couple more audience questions I'll get to. Reminder, if you have one, to throw them in the chat window. This one's around securing PPE. If you have a family member or a friend who's at a position that is considered essential, but doesn't have access to PPE, what advice would you give them on how to get PPE gear? And I'm guessing in this instance, it may be something where the organization they're working for is struggling to get PPE. Recently, we've had CDC is now coming out with guidance on making your own PPE if you're going out in public as individuals. But that's not the same as your, regular higher quality hospital grade PPE. So just Congressman, thoughts on that and resources folks should check out or consider if they're in need of PPE for their essential position.
Well, any requests we're getting on that front, we're bringing to the attention of the State Emergency Operations Center that is helping to coordinate the disbursement of PPE and the requests that are coming in from our medical facilities, from frontline workers, from those who are concerned about getting access and have a short supply on hand. So that includes a lot of our businesses that remain open, serving the public. And while they might not fall into a certain category of needing medical grade equipment, there are lots of businesses that are stepping up right now, manufacturing things that could be of perfectly good use for these workers that are still on the job. So in order to help play matchmaker in those instances where someone has a donation or is manufacturing something that can be of use and there are businesses or workers that need help, we're running all that through the state that can be of assistance there. So you can reach out directly to our office and we're happy to make those connections if possible. And I think one of the silver linings of what we're going through right now is you see the generosity of individuals and businesses that are just trying to do the right thing and are trying to be helpful at this moment where so many people need it. So, the businesses that are manufacturing, hand sanitizer or those, folks that are out there sewing masks, everyone is trying to pitch in and find a way to help. So the generosity of New Hampshire has been on full display the last few weeks.
Great. Julie, another kind of question we can start to wrap up on is on the EIDL program. I believe SBA was running twice daily webinars on kind of navigating that program and the SBA loan programs. Is that going to continue? And do you have any knowledge of how are those types of resources going to be happening twice daily for the foreseeable future if businesses want to jump on and really dig into kind of getting educated on those?
As far as we know, Rachel Roderick of the New Hampshire SBA said that they're plan to continue them. They're at 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. If you go to our website to that link that's on the screen, it lists the Skype number for you to call into. And then we are going to piggyback off of that and have like a 1 o'clock for a couple of days to talk about other programs, the PPP calculation. We're going to work on a cash flow for businesses who are working on, figuring out how do they move forward and continue going through as Congressman Pappas was saying, it's not going to be a light switch and you go back to normal activity. So you're going to have to phase in getting back into the work, people coming back, getting your revenue stream back. So those are other resources that we're going to have. I would also suggest if people go to our website and leave their email, we are going to do weekly emails coming up. And our goal is to always have the latest information that we're getting. And Liz Gray, the state director, is on the phone with SBA and with ASBDC regularly, at least weekly, if not more, so that we're trying to keep our website up to date, and any information that we can put in our newsletter is the most current that we have.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. Well, I think we're going to start to wrap up. Thank you so much, Julie, for joining us. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. And I'll just throw it over to you if you have some kind of closing words, but we really appreciate all of your work and support and outreach to us during this critical time.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the ability to connect with folks in the business community here in Manchester, and just hope you all stay in touch. Keep us well informed of what you're experiencing, and let us know if our office can assist in any direct way, or what you would like to see out of additional pieces of legislation in Washington. In terms of the legislation that we've passed, it has dealt so far with the response effort and also the relief effort, both in terms of the healthcare impacts of the coronavirus and also the economic dislocation that it has caused to our country. But we haven't yet had the conversation about recovery and how we stimulate our economy over the long term. A lot of that is going to depend on how long we're in this state of suspended animation, when we can get back to business as we know it here in our community. And so we do hope that we can resume some of our business activities soon. We do have to follow the instructions of our public health officials and those who have helped craft these restrictive orders that are allowing us to really save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives of our fellow Americans. So we all are trying to do our part right now. And we do have to continue to take our cues from those experts that have been really helpful at providing information during this period. But when it comes time to it, we're absolutely going to sharpen our pencils and want to continue to hear from you about how we can stand our economy up and make sure it gets back up on its feet, and that you all can be successful once again. So I'm sorry that you are going through what you're going through, and about all the obstacles that have been put in your way to serving your customers and delivering your products. But we want to assist you any way we can. So we hope you keep in touch, and I hope everyone out there stays safe.
Thanks again, Congressman, for joining us. Thank you, Julie, for joining us in the great discussion. I want to remind everybody that this webinar will be available by recording soon, and we'll be sharing it. And Corinne from the Chamber team will also be reaching out to everyone who signed up and sharing some of the links and information that was posted in this today. But we appreciate everybody joining us and taking some time on Friday. Thanks again, Congressman Pappas and Julie, for joining us. And have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thanks.